probably noticed if you play a lot of Sonic games, there's an extreme variance in the game's objective quality. That is, problems or benefits a game has that everyone, or most everyone, can agree on, and that are based in facts rather than opinion. There's also an extreme disconnect between personal enjoyment of Sonic games and objective quality for Sonic games. Let me explain what I'm talking about. First, we'll go over the objective qualities of each major game this applies to and how people enjoy games with objective bad qualities or don't enjoy games with objective good ones. And before we do that, let me clarify that I'll be throwing the words objective and factual a lot, and when I say that something is objectively or factually good or bad, what I'm focusing on is actually somewhat subjective because not everyone pays attention to the same factual details. The factual details I notice don't necessarily form my opinion of a game. What forms my opinion is the my enjoyment, whether or not I have fun. I will be focusing on the objective qualities that I notice, things that opinion cannot change, and stating whether they make the game better or worse in that objective sense. Some games have objectively good qualities. For example, Sonic Forces rarely crashes, has very few bugs or glitches, has many options for customization of your avatar. There's 7 different species with unique abilities and 8 different weapons, each with a specific power, and some weapons have unique traits or combinations of traits. Objectively, by design, Sonic Forces has special items that encourage you to come back to levels you've already beaten within the red rings and the number rings and the moon medals. And that's objectively a good thing because it gives you choice in how to play and a motivation to keep playing. There are also some other objective qualities that aren't really necessarily good or bad, like Sonic's lack of idle animation and the shortness of most of the level. I think most people can agree that otherwise the game is at least well put together in the ways that I mentioned. As I have said twice before, I love Sonic 06, but it's an objectively bad video game. Personal enjoyment of a game is subjective, but there are many factual issues with Sonic 06. Many people point out the game has good music. That's a subjective quality. Everyone has different music taste. The game has tons of glitches. That's factually true. The game was also factually unfinished, as some content was cut and can be found if you data mine the game files some more. The cutscene with Elise and Sonic, on the other hand, near the end of the game is definitely weird, but again, that's a matter of personal taste. So that's subjective rather than a matter of fact. If I had to name something Sonic 06 objectively does well, I would say that it would have to be the variety in the stages and the playable characters. And even if you don't enjoy a specific playable character or a specific stage, you have options in which stage of the characters to play. So a lot of people would say that the characters don't control well, they don't have good physics, they don't have good move sets, but again, that depends on your personal preference and controls physics and moveset. It's factually different in those regards than other Sonic games, but not factually bad. Since Sonic Forces does so much objectively well, and Sonic 06 so much badly, you'd think that people would like Sonic Forces more or dislike it less. But again, that's up to personal enjoyment and not a matter of fact. Neither game is objectively more enjoyable than the other. What I'm pointing out is that most of Sonic Force's objective qualities are better than those same qualities compared to Sonic 06, and these parts of Sonic games are what tends to differ in quality among different releases, so I'll explain where I see the more factually problematic qualities coming from and what I think caused it. Speaking only in fact and not matter of opinion, the only thing I can think of regarding Sonic 1 is that sometimes it crashes and it has some areas where the game's selling point, Sonic speed, gotta go fast and all, it's why he's named Sonic after all. It's harder to make use of in those stages, and you actually get punished for using it too much. But the game is mostly stable, mostly playable, has a good amount of levels, and has noticeable distinctions among those levels to give you the feeling of variety. Sonic 2 is factually better in allowing Sonic to use the selling point of the series and factually better, and it has factually more variety than Sonic 1. In these ways, most would agree that it's objectively better. And like I said, objective quality isn't the only thing that informs personal enjoyment, but it is a major factor. Many people have said that Sonic 2 is the best 2D Sonic game or the best Sonic game in general, and I think a large part of that is that it factually does a lot of things right. Don't see much change either in terms of people's opinion of the series or how the quality is really in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. So, going ahead to Sonic 3D Blast, it would be factually correct to say that the game controls differently, plays differently than its earlier 2D counterparts. I personally don't enjoy 3D Blast, but I can't say that it's objectively a bad game. It's not one I enjoy. We wouldn't really see a drop in overall objective quality until Sonic Heroes, which was much buggier, had less variety in stages, and forced you to play the same stages several times, which led to its overall mixed reception. Shadow the Hedgehog had a similar situation, but at the very least, it had more variety in stages and different gameplay options based on weapons. Yet the game was received even worse than Sonic Heroes. And here we are, finally, at Sonic 06, which I already covered before. The game had extremely poor reception at launch, but nowadays the reception is mostly mixed. Arguably, it's a more factually mediocre game than a factually bad one, depending on which factual qualities are important to you. Different people, like I've said before, can focus on or ignore certain individual factual qualities. We wouldn't see another major mess like that until Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. I'll skip over that because I never bought the game or owned a Wii U, and I really don't care to emulate the game. So this leads us to Sonic Forces, which I mentioned earlier along with Sonic 06. Now, I think that major factors in the game's mixed reception and even worse reception among the fan base itself were that so many people felt that the advertising was kind of misleading. I mean, people did expect different from what the game actually gave the players, and it's different in controls and physics, among other things, compared to what Sonic fans are used to. And like I said, that misleading advertising is hard for me to objectively measure, but the controls and physics, same with Sonic 06. They don't make a game objectively bad unless they're hard to use. Now, at Sonic Frontiers, I do think that Sonic Frontiers has many factually good qualities, but it also has a few factually bad ones. So I don't think it's a bad game. At launch, it was a mediocre game, and now it's a good one, but I still dislike Sonic Frontiers because of my personal preference. Where do all of the factual shortcomings come from? For Sonic 1, it was the first game in the series, and you can't expect to get something right on the first try. For Sonic 3D Blast, this isn't necessarily an objective issue, but it's one that might have influenced other games' objective quality. The game was likely hard to program on both the Genesis and the Saturn at the same time, using advanced features that were new to the Sega Genesis cartridges of the time and the newly released Sega Saturn. At the same time, the Saturn was supposed to get a new 3D Sonic game that year, but that game was canceled halfway through development, and Sega had promised a new Sonic game, so they had to rush to get a different 3D Sonic game onto the Sega Saturn. For Sonic Heroes, the game was tied in with a McDonald's promotion, so the game had to be out before then. I can imagine this was one reason the game might have been rushed, but I do know that multiple level designers fell sick, and Takashi Iizuka had to do much of the final work for the level design on his own, which meant that he worked overtime and he was under a lot of stress. Similarly, a McDonald's promotion forced Sonic 3 to release as two different games since some of the levels weren't finished yet, which may have something to do with some of the sound people, music people trying to replace Michael Jackson and his sound team's music tracks when they left the project for whatever reason. There are two popular theories on that. I won't go into either. For Sonic 06, it was a number of things. Sonic Team had no experience coding for such advanced consoles with high specs like the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, Yuji Naka had left Sega and took other Sonic Team staff with him. Code was corrupted late in development. The game was hard to program to run on the Wii, so even more of Sonic Team staff was removed to work on a different Wii game. For Rise of Lyric, Sega's contract with Nintendo was done without the permission of the developers, forcing the developers, Big Red Button, to rework their game engine for the Wii U, which meant that this game was rushed too. For the more recent Sonic Colors Ultimate, the developer already had a bad reputation with remasters and had little experience coding for the Nintendo Switch, so the game released in such a broken state because Sega chose a bad developer. For Sonic Origins, Stealth Team was rushed to rework an existing project into a remaster of Sonic 3, and the game was set for a deadline of Sonic's 31st anniversary, which meant that Sega refused to delay the game past that date, even though both Sonic Team and Headcanon reported that there were problems that needed fixing, which why the unpatched version of the game is so objectively unfinished. When something goes wrong with Sonic, whether it is a matter of fact or a matter of opinion, it's usually Sega's fault since Sega needed a game for the Sega Saturn. Sega needed a Sonic game for Sonic's 50th anniversary year, his 30th anniversary year, and the day of his 31st anniversary. And they decided that it was important for all these games to come out. Sega did little research into how well Blind Squirrel Entertainment was doing in terms of game development. So Colors Ultimate turned out a mess because of Sega's negligence in choosing a developer studio. A lot of times, that has been exactly the problem. Sega has been the reason that Sonic franchise has games that release in such bad states that have objectively bad features. Now, I do think that Sega has learned their lessons on this and is finally treating Sonic with the respect he deserves. But I will have to wait until Sonic Superstars comes out to find out. I'm a little tight financially, so I may not buy the game as soon as it launches, but if Sega proves me right in that I think they're improving, then I will buy the game when I can afford it. The game looks amazing, and it looks like a game that has few to no flaws that you could, like, say that opinion can't change this. It's just fact. Like, it doesn't look bad in any of those aspects, but we'll have to wait and see for when it releases. I have high hopes this time around. If you enjoyed listening to my discussion, be sure to like the video, and if you want to see even more, press the subscribe button if you haven't already done that, and you can support me financially via Super Things. As always, stay safe, stay cool, and I'll see you next time.